Okay, welcome back to Objective 2. This objective's only got a few slides, 2 or 3 slides, because part of what I want you to do, when we've talked about market commonality and resource similarity, I want you to go back and reflect on Prius and its competitors over time, and the nature of the markets, the market commonality, and the nature of resource similarity or difference it has with its other competitors. So this takes 3 or 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, the objective, and then probably for you to do some dot points on market commonality and resource similarity. Will probably take you 5 or 10 minutes. And then we'll come back and we'll look at Objective 3, which is about the likelihood of a competitor taking a competitive action. So we're going to move on to our discussion of competitive rivalry attack, which is 3, and likelihood of attack, which is Objective 3, likelihood of response, which is Objective 4. So let's come back to where we're looking at for Objective 2. Market commonality, whether your company shares markets. So with market commonality, what happens is that with the greater amount of market commonality, the less likelihood of competitive rivalry. Because when you're competing in the same or multiple markets, one action in one market affects the action in another market. So airline companies, chemical companies, electronic companies tend to have greater levels of market commonality because they compete across a large number of markets. Fuel companies may as well. But market commonality is only an impact on the likelihood on competitive rivalry because it reduces. I'll say that again. Market commonality is only impacts on competitive rivalry is because it reduces the likelihood of a firm making an attack. Because when it does do something, because there's so much market commonality, it's likely that there will be a response. So if you do something, if your firm takes a strategic actions, it's very likely that there'll be a response, and that response will be rapid from your competitors. So sometimes firms end up, when they have a lot of market commonality, in sort of a lower level of rivalry, almost a truce, because if there's too much rivalry, if there's too much attack and response, they feel that it will lower their ability to make above average returns and maintain a strategic competitive advantage. Resource similarity is the other thing that influences whether or not a firm is likely to attack and respond. So if the companies have similar tangible and intangible resources, it's less likely that they will attack or respond. It's less likely that there will be competitive rivalry. Again, because if they have similar resources and tangible and intangible resources, it's likely they have similar core competency. So no matter what they do, they're likely to end up with strategic parity. But let's be truthful, we've talked about this before, how difficult it is to identify the actual combination of tangible and intangible resources that lead to having a strategic capability, and that create that and the combination of that resources and capability, whether those resources and capability actually do produce a core competency, which is rare, valuable, difficult to imitate and not substitutable, And the linkages are difficult to identify. So even when firms have similar resources, they may have different combinations of those resources that lead to different core competencies, or it may just be unclear what the source of the core competencies are. So in that case, it's far more difficult to look at or to identify the likelihood of attack and response. Having said that, though, one needs to go back and look at the market to identify what is occurring. Firms need to be aware of what's happening and need to be motivated to make a response or to make an attack. If they're unaware of what's occurring in the market, and many firms are particularly poor at market analysis, they get surprised by changes. Or they're not motivated because they don't see the importance of an attack or response, or they don't perceive what's occurring to actually be a strategic rather than tactical, or long-term rather than short-term, or something that will affect their performance, they're less likely to engage in, that's less likely to have competitive rivalry. So those are the background, the information gathering aspects of the model of competitive rivalry. I want you to reflect now for Prius on resource similarity and market commonality, because from the video you can see that they're pretty much aware of what's happening. And when you've thought about the resource similarity and market commonality, come back and we'll move on to objective 3, which is when we start to look at competitive rivalry and the likelihood of attack.